Walk with me through the cobblestone streets of a city that no longer exists, but which is, at the same time, every city in the world. We are in Dublin. It is Thursday, June 16th, 1904. To any inhabitant of the time, it was an inconsequential day, a day of moderate heat and grey routines. But for human history, this day would become the definitive map of consciousness. We are talking about Ulysses, the masterpiece of James Joyce, a book many claim to have read, many more have abandoned, and which is in reality a cathedral built of words, where every brick is a thought and every stained glass window is a different literary style. To understand the magnitude of what Joyce attempted and achieved, we must first place ourselves in the mind of a man who considered himself a voluntary exile. Joyce wrote this novel far from his homeland, in cities like Trieste, Zurich, and Paris, during 7 years of poverty, failing eyesight, and a perfectionism that bordered on madness. His intention was not simply to write a story, but to capture the totality of the human experience in a single 24-hour cycle. To understand why this work changed the rules of the game forever, we must look back at the world before 1922, the year the novel was first published in its entirety by the legendary Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris. Before Joyce, the novel was usually a narrator telling us what characters were thinking from a comfortable distance. Joyce shatters the glass. He puts us inside the head, but not in an orderly or clean way. He plunges us into what experts call the stream of consciousness, the incessant flow of thoughts, memories, desires, and physical sensations that pass through our minds before we can organize them into logical sentences. Imagine your brain is a radio catching 10 stations at the same time. That is what Joyce puts on paper. And to do so, he uses Homer's Odyssey as his structure. Each chapter of Ulysses corresponds to an episode of Odysseus' journey back to Ithaca, but with an ironic and deeply human twist. The hero is no longer a warrior king from ancient Greece, but an ordinary man, a Jewish advertising canvasser named Leopold Bloom, who walks through Dublin trying to avoid the thought that his wife is being unfaithful. The plot of the work is deceptively simple, but its execution is of overwhelming complexity. The book follows 3 main characters. First, we meet Stephen Dedalus, a young poet and intellectual, bitter and consumed by guilt over his mother's death, representing the figure of the son in search of a spiritual father. Stephen is the mind theory art stagnant in melancholy. Then appears Leopold Bloom, our protagonist, who is the body, sensibility, the man who feels hunger, who goes to the bathroom, who watches women on the street, and who silently suffers the loss of his infant son years ago. Bloom is the modern Odysseus. And finally, we have Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife, who represents the earth, the flesh, and the eternal cycle of life. Throughout the day, Stephen and Bloom wander the city, crossing paths unknowingly, living their own miniature odysseys until their paths finally converge in a night of hallucinations and discoveries. But to fully enter the deconstruction of this work, we must ask ourselves why Joyce decided that a man who eats pork kidneys for breakfast and attends a funeral should be the equivalent of a mythological hero. Here lies the first great lesson of Joycean narratology, the epic of the everyday. Joyce tells us that the life of an ordinary man is as worthy of being told as the Trojan Wars. The small battles against loneliness, the desire for human connection, and simple physical survival are the true heroic acts of modernity. By using Homer's structure, Joyce is not mocking Bloom, but elevating him. When Bloom enters a library, he is not fighting monsters, but he is navigating the ideas and egos of intellectuals, which can be just as dangerous for the spirit. This depth manifests radically in the style. Ulysses does not have just one style, it has 18. Each chapter has a different technique, an assigned hour of the day, an associated organ of the human body, and a predominant color. This is not just a display of technical virtuosity, but an exploration of how language shapes reality. In one chapter, Joyce imitates the evolution of the English language, from its Latin and Anglo-Saxon roots to the slang of the suburbs in 1904, to symbolize the growth of a fetus in the womb. In another, he uses an almost scientific question and answer format, like a cold catechism, to strip reality of any sentimentality. This technique teaches us that we do not see the world as it is, but as we are able to name it. If language changes, our perception of reality changes with it. This inevitably leads us to another crucial aspect, the representation of the human body. In literature before Joyce, characters seem to have no physiological needs. They rarely ate in detail, almost never went to the bathroom, and their sexual desires were wrapped in poetic metaphors. Joyce breaks this taboo with an honesty that was labeled obscene at the time. In fact, the book was banned in the United States and the United Kingdom for years. But Joyce was not seeking scandal for scandal's sake. He understood that consciousness is not separate from the body. Bloom thinks while he chews. His thoughts are altered by hunger or fatigue. By including the low, the dirty, and the purely biological, Joyce completes the portrait of the human being. We are fallen angels, but we are also machines of flesh and bone that process reality through the senses. As modern psychologists would say, we are embodied beings and our identity depends as much on our memories as it does on our digestive system. But to understand this fully, we must look at the relationship between Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom. Stephen is the young man searching for a father because he feels spiritually orphaned, rejecting his biological father, who is an alcoholic and a decadent man. Bloom is the father searching for a son to fill the void left by his son Rudy, who died at 11 days old. This encounter, which occurs toward the end of the book, is one of the most subtle and powerful moments in world literature. There is no tearful embrace, no magical resolution to their problems. There is an exchange of cocoa, a talk about astronomy and music, and a shared urination under the stars. Joyce suggests that human connection is fragile and ephemeral, but it is the only thing that saves us from total isolation. In the great modern city, where thousands of people cross paths without looking at each other, the simple act of recognizing the other as an equal is a metaphysical victory. This notion of isolation connects us with a philosophical concept that runs through the entire novel, time. In Ulysses, time is not a straight line, it is a web. Joyce plays with the idea of the eternal return. As the characters walk through Dublin, the past is always present. Stephen cannot escape the shadow of his dead mother, and Bloom cannot stop seeing the ghost of his son in every corner. History, as Stephen says in one of the book's most famous phrases, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. For Joyce, the human being is trapped in the repetition of myths, in the repetition of historical errors, and in the repetition of their own mental habits. The only way to break that cycle is through epiphany, that moment of revelation where the ordinary becomes sacred. If we analyze the work from a psychological perspective, we see that Joyce anticipated many of the discoveries of psychoanalysis regarding the unconscious. In the Night chapter, set in Dublin's red light district and written as if it were a hallucinogenic play, the repressed fears and desires of Bloom and Stephen come to life. They transform physically. They face their fetishes and their sins. It is a visual representation of what happens in our minds during sleep or in states of nervous crisis. Narrative experts point out that this chapter, known as Circe, is a direct ancestor of surrealism. Joyce understood that identity is not a solid rock, but a fluid that changes shape according to the environment and emotional pressure. But the deconstruction would not be complete without talking about the grand finale, Molly Bloom's soliloquy. After hundreds of pages following the men, the final word belongs to the woman. This chapter is a torrent of thoughts without punctuation marks, a pure stream of consciousness that flows without interruption. Here, Molly reflects on her lovers, on her youth in Gibraltar, on her marriage to Bloom, and on the very nature of desire. It is a resounding affirmation of life. Despite all the miseries, all the misunderstandings, and the weight of existence, the book ends with the word yes. Yes, I will, yes. This final yes is the acceptance of the world's chaos, the acceptance of human imperfection, and the commitment to keep living despite everything. It is a closing that transforms the anguish of the rest of the novel into a melody of biological hope. This leads us to consider the current relevance of Ulysses in the 21st century. We might think that a book written 100 years ago about a day in Dublin has nothing to say to us in the age of artificial intelligence and social media. However, the reality is quite the opposite. We are living in the age of information overload, a constant bombardment of stimuli, news, and the thoughts of others that closely resembles the structure of Ulysses. Joyce's book is, in essence, the first hyperlink in history. Every mention of a song, an advertisement, or a political event from 1904 functions as a link that connects us to the rest of the culture of his time. Joyce created a paper internet long before fiber optics existed. Furthermore, in a world where attention is increasingly fragmented, reading Ulysses is an act of resistance. It forces us to slow down, to pay attention to nuances, to understand that depth requires effort. Neuroscientists have suggested that reading complex texts like Joyce's activates areas of the brain related to problem solving and empathy in a way that simple texts do not. By trying to decipher Bloom's thoughts, we are training our ability to understand the complexity of other human beings. Ulysses teaches us that no one is an extra in the movie of life. We are all the protagonists of our own odyssey, with our own monsters and our own sirens. In terms of cultural legacy, Joyce's footprint is immeasurable. From avant-garde literature to contemporary cinema, the idea that narrative can be subjective and fragmented comes largely from this book. Without Ulysses, we wouldn't have the novels of Virginia Woolf, nor magical realism that plays with time, nor even modern television series that explore the psyche of their characters through dreams and visions. Joyce gave creators permission to be difficult, to be experimental, and to trust the audience's intelligence. But beyond its technical importance, what makes Ulysses endure is its immense compassion. Despite its erudition and its wordplay in multiple languages, at the heart of the book is a heart that beats strongly. It is the heart of a man, Leopold Bloom, who despite being a pariah in his own city because of his Jewish origin, despite being ridiculed by his neighbors and cheated on by his wife, maintains a basic decency and an inexhaustible curiosity about the world. Bloom is the antidote to fanaticism. In a famous chapter, he faces an aggressive nationalist and defines love simply as the opposite of hatred. In that simplicity lies the true greatness of the work. The connection to current technology is another fascinating point. If we observe how our social media feeds work, we see a disjointed succession of images, opinions, advertising, and fragments of personal life. It is literally the Joycean stream of consciousness materialized on a screen. Joyce understood that the modern mind is not an orderly garden, but a public square full of voices shouting at the same time. Reading Ulysses today, we are not reading a relic of the past, but an instruction manual for understanding the chaos of our present. It helps us navigate sensory overload by reminding us that, in the midst of all that noise, it is still possible to find moments of beauty and genuine connection. Even in popular culture, Bloom's shadow is long. The concept of the anti-hero, that character who is not physically imposing or morally perfect, but with whom we identify deeply, has one of its purest ancestors in Leopold Bloom. Bloom is the father of all modern characters trying to do the right thing in a world that seems to make no sense. His daily life is a lesson in resilience. He doesn't need to win a war to be brave. It is enough for him to get up, prepare breakfast, and keep walking despite the sadness he carries in his pocket like a stone. We can also see a profound relationship between the structure of the work and the discoveries of quantum physics that were beginning to emerge at that time. Just as at the subatomic level, particles can be in several places at once or behave unpredictably, in Ulysses, reality is multipolar. There is no single truth about what happens in a scene. There are as many truths as there are consciousnesses present. This multiplicity of perspectives is the basis of our modern view of the world, where we understand that pure objectivity is a myth and that everything is filtered by the observer. Joyce was the chronicler of this uncertainty, and he did so with almost mathematical precision. To understand the impact of this work on the history of thought, we must also consider how Joyce challenged notions of nation and identity. Being Irish, he wrote in the language of the conqueror, English, but he did so in such a way that he subverted all its rules. Ulysses is an act of cultural and linguistic appropriation. Joyce said he wanted to give Dublin such importance that if the city disappeared from the face of the earth, it could be rebuilt brick by brick, using his book as a blueprint. And he succeeded. But he didn't just rebuild the physical city, he rebuilt the soul of a people and, by extension, the soul of cosmopolitan humanity. Bloom, a Jew of Hungarian origin living in Ireland, is the perfect symbol of the world citizen, the one who doesn't quite fit in anywhere but belongs everywhere. This idea of the world citizen is more relevant than ever in our globalized society. Ulysses speaks to us of exile, not only the physical exile of those who leave their country, but the interior exile of those who feel like strangers in their own skin or in their own society. Joyce tells us that this strangeness is the fundamental human condition, but it is precisely this strangeness that allows us to observe the world with new eyes and with a curiosity that does not stop at prejudice. The novel is a song to difference and tolerance, values we often forget in modern conflicts. Coming to the more technical aspects that a modern screenwriter or narratologist would admire, we must highlight the use of the leitmotif. Just like in Richard Wagner's operas, Joyce introduces small fragments of phrases, objects, or sounds that repeat throughout the 800 pages. A coin, a fairground song, the rustling of a paper, the smell of a lemon soap that Bloom carries in his pocket. These elements act as anchors for the reader. When they reappear, they trigger associations of ideas that connect chapters separated by hours of difference. It is a way of building a narrative structure that doesn't depend on linear plot, but on emotional and sensory resonance. It is, in essence, how our memory works. We don't remember our lives as a continuous movie, but as a series of flashes linked by sensations. This leads us to reflect on the very nature of literature. Joyce pushed the written word to the limit of its possibilities. After Ulysses, many writers felt that nothing new could be done with the traditional way of telling stories. The book is both an end and a beginning. It is the end of the 19th century novel, with its omniscient narrator and its moral order, and it is the beginning of everything that came after, postmodernism. The metafictional game where the book is aware of being a book, and the limitless exploration of depth psychology. Reading Ulysses is like attending a masterclass on all the tools a writer has at their disposal, from the sharpest parody to the highest lyricism. But don't be intimidated by its reputation as a difficult book. The difficulty of Ulysses is the difficulty of life itself. It is not a barrier put up by Joyce to keep people away, but an invitation to participate actively in the creation of meaning. Joyce doesn't want passive readers who receive a pre-chewed lesson. He wants accomplices who walk with him, who get lost in the streets of Dublin, and who draw their own conclusions. It is a book that needs to be read with the ears, with the stomach, and with the heart, not just with the eyes. There is humor in its pages, an earthy and often scatological humor that reminds us not to take our own pretensions of greatness too seriously. At the end of the day, after following Bloom and Stephen through cemeteries, libraries, taverns, and brothels, we return home. But home is no longer the same. We are no longer the same. We have seen the world through the eyes of another, and that is the greatest gift art can offer. We have understood that every person walking beside us on the street carries within them a universe as vast and complex as that of the ancient heroes. We have learned that mystery is not in the distant or the fantastic, but in the here and now, in the miracle of being alive and aware in this precise moment. Ulysses is a celebration of existence in all its glorious and chaotic totality. It is a reminder that although time passes and cities change, the fundamental questions of the human being remain the same. Who are we? How do we connect with others? How do we face our own mortality? Joyce doesn't give us easy answers because there are none, but he gives us a language to keep searching. A language that is at once ancient like Homer and modern like the last thought that crossed your mind a second ago. This monumental work invites us to reconcile with our own humanity, with our weaknesses, and with our amazing capacity to persist. In the small daily odyssey of each of us, there is an epic that deserves to be celebrated. Bloom returns to his bed to sleep beside Molly, and in that final rest, there is a peace that transcends exhaustion. It is the peace of having fulfilled the day, of having navigated the storms of the mind and having reached the shore once again. Closing this analysis, we are left with the feeling of having barely scratched the surface of an ocean. Ulysses is a book for a lifetime, one that changes every time we open it again because we have changed in the interval. It is a monument to creative freedom and a testament to the power of the word to give meaning to the disorder of experience. We say goodbye to Dublin, to Bloom, and to Stephen, but we take with us that stream of consciousness that now somehow feels a little brighter and a little less lonely. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the mind of James Joyce and the deepest corners of our own nature. Next time you walk through your own city, remember that every step is a verse and every encounter is a potential myth. Until we meet again between the pages of another great story.